Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be doing one of my first deep dive videos about books. I have been doing deep dive videos about Taylor Swift. This specific video is going to be about books. So special editions are something that are very near and dear to my heart. If you cannot tell, I really love special edition books. I'm a book collector. I'm an avid reader. When I first started falling into this spiral of the rise of book boxes, the rise of special editions, and I kind of realized that before I talk about the current state of the industry, I think I first need to talk about the rise of the subscription service and then the rise of book boxes so that we can understand kind of where we came from and then understand why we are where we are today. As a little bit of a disclaimer in the beginning, there are an infinite number of book boxes. There are new ones popping up every single day, so it is unrealistic to believe that I would mention even half of the book boxes that are out there. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on the book boxes that are on the more mainstream side. They're the ones that have really been shaping the special edition industry. They're the ones that have been paving the way for some of the smaller book boxes that we've seen pop up, and they're the ones that have the heaviest customizations on their books. There are other subscription services, like for instance, Once Upon a Book Club. That was one of the early book box subscriptions. However, they don't really customize books, with the exception of the Bridgerton special editions that they did, which were really lovely, but that's kind of atypical for the books that they are sending out each month. And then I also upfront just wanted to mention Goldsboro because I don't have any personal experience with Goldsboro, so I don't feel like I can fully speak to everything that they've been doing. However, I do feel like the Broken Binding has a pretty similar origin to Goldsboro, and I am going to be talking about them, so I hope that that will kind of group those two together. Both of those started as brick and mortar stores and then started offering a subscription service to readers. There are many other independent bookstores that have done this as well, but Broken Binding and Goldsboro are known for offering special editions with customizations. And I also just want to note the wording on Goldsboro's main page where they talk about their subscription. I feel like it kind of perfectly sums up my feelings toward the special edition industry at the moment. So each month they offer a title that has the possibility of becoming a collectible. I also personally feel like we are kind of at a turning point within the special edition industry, and that's really what sparked my interest in doing this deep dive overall. So just to give you an idea of what to expect, we're going to look at a comprehensive timeline of the rise of book boxes. That's going to depict when they started launching to some pivotal business decisions that they've made along the way. We're going to cover what makes a special edition special, what makes a special edition valuable, some of the most common complaints that are thrown around about these book box companies, and then we're going to kind of discuss the state of the industry. And I also had posted some polls on my Instagram story because I wanted to get feedback from other people who are just like me, subscribers of these, and wanted to get their feelings about the state of things. So I'll also be sharing the results of those polls. Okay, so for our first section, we're going to be talking about the rise of the subscription box. So interestingly enough, the first subscription that was offered by mail actually was from a book company, and that was in 1926 when Book of the Month launched. Harry Sherman started Book of the Month Club with the intention of having a guaranteed monthly income for their company. Their initial mailing that they sent out was for 4,500 books, and within just 8 months of offering their subscription, their subscriber base grew to over 46,000 subscribers. That netted them over $500,000 in income, which is just incredible because, again, we're talking about 1926, 1927. Even in today's dollars, that is a lot of money to be gained. Book of the Month also started as a very literary focused subscription. They're credited with putting authors like Ernest Hemingway and J.D. Salinger into the hands of lots of people. It could be argued that some of these authors would not have gained the literary notoriety that they did had they not been included in Book of the Month. Book of the Month had a dedicated staff of people who were very heavily invested in literature and in promoting what was the best in literature, and that board of people would select their monthly picks. It's similar to what we see now, the way that they handle things. However, there's definitely less of a focus on literary fiction, and they do skew more heavily toward the mainstream money-making books like thrillers and romance, those titles are always heavily featured. So despite their success, it actually took decades before any other companies kind of jumped on the bandwagon of this subscription-based model. I do want to keep this video mainly focused on books, but I will just point out a couple of the other really popular subscription services that did pop up because I think it's interesting and I think some of you might find it interesting too. So in 1955, Columbia Record Company joined the subscription game. They sold over 7 million records in just their first year. They also ended up merging with Book of the Month at one point, but they ultimately failed when streaming services became popular. And in addition to that, I think companies like Napster and BearShare and Kazaa and LimeWire and all of those, when people started really heavily pirating music, also probably were their detriment. In 1997, Netflix came about, which was the first monthly movie subscription service as well as the first streaming service. And also kind of interesting, they actually had asked Blockbuster to merge with them early on so that they would have brick and mortar stores, but Blockbuster declined. That was clearly a mistake. Then in 2010, Birchbox came about, and Birchbox is a makeup subscription box that was founded by 2 Harvard business graduates. This one is still in business and still one of the more lucrative subscription services. In 2012, right afterward, we saw Blue Apron come about. This is another subscription service that is still in business, and it was the first food subscription service offered within the United States. There was a food subscription service offered in Sweden earlier on. And then the last box that I want to talk about in this section is in 2012, we saw Loot Crate come about. The reason that I want to include Loot Crate in this is because I think that Loot Crate really paved the way for the book box model. So unlike previous subscription services, Loot Crate was full of fandom items. There was usually some kind of theme, and there were items that would span across many different fandoms. When I was thinking about the rise of Loot Crate, I was also thinking about the MCU and how when the MCU came about, that really put fandom into the forefront of mainstream culture. Up until that point, it was not seen as cool or anything to like be really heavily invested in fandoms. But in 2012, that's when Avengers came out. That is when people started going to the theaters in droves to see every single Marvel movie. It didn't matter what you were into. Marvel seemed to be something that everyone had in common. I think it made people feel more comfortable about self-identifying as a fan. And it was really when fandom started becoming celebrated in a way that it just never had before. And that brings us to our second section, which is the rise of book boxes and special editions. A timeline. So early book boxes came with little to no customizations, and in addition to the monthly book, they always featured a plethora of fandom items from different works of literature. Without a doubt, YA is the age range where these boxes first started cropping up. Each box included fandom-themed trinkets, which allowed you to display your love for a certain series or just your love of reading in general. There were often general bookish items, things that just encouraged people to read. The first customization that we began to see in book boxes was really covers that had an alternate colorway. So the same cover, except just offered in an exclusive color that you could only get through X subscription box. Many of the items that were featured in these boxes were created by small businesses. At that point in time, really nothing was being licensed. It was kind of like the wild, wild west of book boxes. Now we see that publishers do care a lot more about what's being included in boxes. And I think that that's a direct result of the great A Court of Mist and Fury soap debacle of 2018. I'm not going to go into depth about that, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should absolutely Google it because it's pretty wild. This led to publishers being a little bit stricter. It also led to authors being the ones to license out the rights to their products and to people. I think Sarah J. Maas actually is like really the author that kind of paved the way for other authors to offer licenses for their intellectual property. So moving into the timeline. So kicking things off in March of 2018, 2015, Owl Crate launched their first box. The theme was fantasy, and the first book that they featured was A Darker Shade of Magic by Victoria Schwab. Following that, also in 2015, in November of 2015, Illumicrate launched their first box, which was just called Box 1, and it featured Wolf by Wolf by Ryan Grodin. And then not too much later, in March of 2016, Fairy Loot launched their first box, which was called Retelling, and it featured Forbidden Wish by Jessica Corey. Then in May 2016, LitJoy Crate launched their first YA box, and their theme was Lady Bandit, with the first pick being Rebel Sands by Alwyn Hamilton. Then in December 2016, Owl Crate launched Owl Crate Junior, which was their middle grade subscription service. Their first box was Winter Wonderland, and the book featured was A Boy Called Christmas by Matt Haig. Then we saw a little bit of a lull for a while, and it wasn't until July 2020 that we really had the next big significant thing on this timeline, and that is Brandon Sanderson launching the Kickstarter for The Way of Kings Leatherbounds. This campaign was fully funded within 3 minutes. In 2 hours, every single stretch goal was unlocked, and the campaign had over 10,000 backers. The project was successfully funded by almost 30,000 backers, and it raised $6,788,517, which is the largest bookish Kickstarter in the history of Kickstarter. It was absolutely unheard of, and it totally made waves within the publishing industry. Then in 2021, LitJoy switched to a quarterly subscription box, and it started focusing more on series edition book boxes, so one-time purchases for series like The Mortal Instruments, for The Folk of the Air, for Nevernight, with much less focus on their monthly offerings. In January 2021, the Bookish Box launched their YA subscription. They launched Unchosen by Catherine Blair, and they also launched their adult book box, and that included The Wrong Family by Taryn Fisher. In August of 2021, The Broken Binding opened up pre-orders for their Faithful and the Fallen special editions by John Gwynne. These caused quite a stir online, and people were very upset when Orbit said that they were not allowed to ship to the United States. In August 2021, Illumicrate launched their Afterlight quarterly subscription, with the first book being The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. This book was later redone and released with more customizations, and along with the rest of the series in March of 2023. Then in September 2021, Wraithmarked Creative launched their first Kickstarter for A Mark of Kings by Bryce O'Connor and Luke Chimelko. This campaign had a total of 524 backers. In September 2021, The Broken Binding opened up their Dandelion Dynasty special editions for pre-order. These have since become quite the hot commodity, so much so that The Broken Binding is going to be making Midnight editions, which will be the same customizations but a different colorway. And then in March 2022, The Broken Binding launched their first subscription box, and their first subscription series was First Law by Joe Abercrombie. So I wanted to point those out specifically because they were just releasing some one-off special editions with The Faithful and the Fallen and Dandelion Dynasty, and there were probably a couple of other ones in there too, but they had gotten so much attention that led to them doing their own subscription service. And part of the reason why I feel like The Broken Binding has been successful is because they focus on backlist fantasy series. So it's not a new fantasy series that you're getting. It's not something that you're going to find in other book boxes. It's something older, already beloved. You already know that you have read and loved this series, so it's less of a gamble to be subscribed to them. Then also in March of 2022, Brandon Sanderson launches the Year of Secret Projects Kickstarter. This Kickstarter raised over $7.5 million in the first 6 hours, and it ended with 185,341 backers, and it raised almost $42 million. So once again, Brandon Sanderson just upended publishing and just set some wild records. In March 2022, Fairy Loot launched their adult book-only subscription. Their theme was Dark Academia, and their first book was The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. Then in May 2022, Fairy Loot launched their book-only YA subscription. So this I feel like is important to talk about because At this point in the timeline, LitJoy has already moved away from doing monthly book boxes. They are now focused on quarterly boxes and doing one-off special editions. We're seeing people start to complain about the price of book boxes. A lot of the book boxes are based in the UK, so it can be more expensive, especially if you're ordering internationally. It's also gotten to a point where if you've been getting book boxes for a while, you likely do not want any more bookish merchandise. There's only so much that you can practically use. I think people are starting to become a little bit more conscious of their impact on the environment and seeing that there just really isn't the need to have these little trinket items. Really, what you're subscribing for is because you want the book. So these companies have responded by offering book-only options. I'm not 100% sure when Illumicrate started doing their book-only option, but I have to imagine that it was around the same time. Owlcrate, I believe, followed a little bit later. Unfortunately, some of the Illumicrate announcements were only communicated through email, and I don't have those anymore, so I don't have the exact dates, but I do feel like this is an important turning point that is worth mentioning. Then in November 2022, Wraithmarked Creative launched their Sword of Kaigen Kickstarter, and this was fully funded in under 5 minutes. In December 2022, LitJoy revamps their subscription box yet again to be called the To Be Read box, and they're now offering a customizable book box where the subscriber actually chooses between 2 books, and they also have the option of picking 1 to 3 bookish items to be in their quarterly box based on the tier that they're paying for. In January 2023, Illumicrate's Afterlight subscription goes bi-monthly and offers a book-only option. In April 2023, The Broken Binding launches their Tier 2 subscription featuring the Tide Child trilogy by R.J. Barker. This just shows how in demand The Broken Binding was, that they opened up a Tier 2 subscription in order to make their products more widely available. The wait list had been at like 10 years at that point. The only way to be accepted into their subscription was if a current subscriber would cancel, and that was not really happening. In July of 2023, Illumicrate launched their Evernight quarterly subscription with Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and this is a quarterly horror subscription. Also in July 2023, Owlcrate launched their adult fantasy box. The theme was Let the Games Begin, and it featured Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. In December 2023, Owlcrate ended their Owlcrate Junior subscription box, so I suppose the middle grade subscription was not doing as well. Then in January 2024, Illumicrate's Afterlight subscription goes monthly, so monthly books again, and still book only. In April 2024, Fairy Loot launches their Romantasy subscription, and TBD for 2024, but The Broken Binding has announced that they will be launching a sci-fi subscription, which will also focus on more backlist science fiction books. During this time, but also toward the end of the timeline, we also see the rise of special editions being offered by bookstores and by publishers. Specifically, Barnes & Noble has been doing a lot of exclusive editions. Bookstores like Waterstones have special editions. As I mentioned, Goldsboro, though they do have their subscription. And then there's also, Forbidden Planet has done that. And then more recently, we've seen the rise of publisher special editions. So specifically, one of the books that I think put this in the forefront was Fourth Wing, when that came out, with the first print run having a limited edition sprayed pages with the dragons on them. The book ended up blowing up. Nobody was expecting it to do anywhere near as well as it did, and it became extremely hard to find that first print run. People were selling them online for like upwards of $1,000, and that I think has encouraged a lot of publishers, specifically Red Tower, but also some other publishers like Bloom, and now even like Bramble and even Random House are doing these pushes for first print runs to have a special customization, usually with sprayed pages. That way they can encourage people to pre-order them just in the hopes that you're going to love the book, or the book's going to end up being a big hit, because after that first print run happens, it's going to be pretty hard to find the edition. And then we're also seeing collector's editions spring up. Specifically, I would say Orbit has been doing a really good job with this. Like, they've done those special collector's editions for the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey. They have done a special edition for Ruination, which is their League of Legends book, and they they currently have a pre-order up for their Wilderwood duology by Hannah Witten. So the reason that I wanted to lay out this entire timeline is just because I feel like it's really interesting to see the way that book boxes have evolved since their inception to where we are now. In the beginning, people really loved those special bookish items that were offered, and now that's like not even a thought in the consumer's mind. Book-only subscriptions are way more popular than options that come with fandom items. Oh, another thing that also happened that I don't have the exact dates for, but Fairy Loot and Illumicrate also opened up US distribution centers over the past couple of years, and that's made it more affordable for US subscribers who are not now having a monthly international package and being charged in a currency that is a lot more valuable than the value of our dollar. So there's that arc. And then the other thing that I found really interesting is the way that Kickstarters have really changed things. I think Brandon Sanderson really proved that there is a demand for customized fantasy books, beautiful books that are going to align your shelves. And with the success of Way of Kings, it encouraged a lot of indie fantasy authors who otherwise wouldn't have had such a wide audience for their work to launch their own Kickstarters. And everyone loves having a special edition. I think a lot of people are taking more chances. People are investing in special editions of books that they've never read in the hopes that they will love the book, in the hopes that the book will become extremely valuable. But with so many choices, how are consumers feeling? And that brings us to our next section, oversaturation. Question mark? So it's obviously hard to get a definitive answer on this, but from what I've seen on social media, a lot of people are feeling special edition fatigue. Judging from my poll results and from comments that I've gotten on videos in the past, people are definitely less excited about special editions than they used to be. It's really exciting that books that weren't receiving the marketing push that they deserved from publishers have found their way into the hands of a much wider audience by being distributed through book boxes. Future editing Kristen here. I just wanted to interject that book boxes today do get books into the hands of many more readers, especially if it is a debut book. However, they do not count toward the New York Times bestseller list. When many of the book boxes that are out there have the same target demographic, it's becoming increasingly hard to justify keeping a subscription to each service, especially when many of the book boxes are overlapping on the monthly titles that they are choosing. One other thing that I also want to bring up, when you are subscribing to a book box, it's almost like you are gambling. You are taking a chance on a new release that you probably haven't read yet, unless you've had access to an ARC, but the vast majority of subscribers don't have that. So you're taking a chance in the hopes that you will like whatever book this company chose. You're taking a chance that you will like the design of this book better than what other companies are offering or what a traditional publisher is offering. And it's hard to predict. And sometimes you get burned. There have been books where I've been so sure that I'm gonna love that book, and I get multiple copies of that book because I just know that it's gonna be a favorite, and then I hate it, or it's very middling and I don't want any of the editions that I got because it's not a favorite. So again, like, it feels like you're taking a gamble, and that kind of reminds me of something that Andrew and I have talked about a lot, and that is about blind boxes or items like that in video games, because that's something that is now seeing more regulation on different markets. Like specifically, I think in Europe, they're becoming a little bit more strict with that. Now consumers, they have to know like what the chances are to get something that they're purchasing. While it is a little bit different because you know, like, you're guaranteed that you are getting a book, it still, I think, has that same correlation, that same translation, because while you are receiving a physical item, you do not know if it's going to be a physical item that you will want. I think a good rule of thumb going forward is quality over quantity. In addition to the obvious money-related issue, there's also the issue of space. All of us live in a certain dwelling. We only have a finite amount of space, and while there is the saying you can always just buy a new bookshelf, you will run out of space to put bookshelves, and you might have a partner or family member or whoever you live with that does not want every single wall to just be covered in bookshelves. Books are physical objects. They take up valuable real estate on your shelf From what I've found, a lot of the book box options for the monthly options do end up being more on the mediocre side. Every once in a while, you get that really exceptional gem, and it's always exciting. But I would say overall, in my experience, the vast number that I have read that are choosing new titles have typically been 3-star reads. If you're being honest with yourself, you have to really think about, do you need multiple copies of a book that you thought was only okay just because it's really pretty? No shade to anyone who does, because obviously I also have a lot of multiple editions of books on my shelves. I have tried really hard to pare down over the past year or so. I would say definitely in the last year I've gotten rid of a lot of books, but I'm trying to reframe my own mindset and kind of try to make that decision before investing in any new books going forward. Because special editions have become more accessible, I would also argue that the secondhand market has taken a bit of a dive. Obviously, there are those outlier books that people really want to get their hands on and are willing to pay upwards of $1,000 for. But if you look at books that are part of a monthly subscription, like the books that you have to get in order to remain a subscriber and get early access for sales that you are probably more interested in than the monthly books, those books, you can't even sell them at face value most of the time. Again, every once in a while, for instance, the Fairy Loot Divine Rivals, that was really expensive, that kind of blew up. But if you're just looking at a normal title that didn't really garner much hype, people are listing those for $20 online, which is pretty much half the price that they paid, and they're still just sitting there for months. There also are sellers that are asking for outrageous amounts of money that is just so much more than what the book is actually worth. And I think that, in addition with the number of special editions that are available nowadays, has also hindered the secondhand market because there are just so many options. So that brings us to our next section, which is, why did special editions become so popular? So collectors have always existed. There have always been people who have loved to own something exclusive, whether it's for the prestige, the thrill of the hunt, the genuine love of the item, or any number of other reasons. But there is a clear reason that we have seen a rise in the book collecting industry over the past 10 years, and that, my friends, is social media. I'm speaking specifically about Instagram and YouTube. Sadly for book bloggers, we didn't see these kinds of partnerships really start coming about until blogs started losing popularity, which I've always found very interesting because blogs have always had very clear, measurable statistics, whereas on social media, you were dependent upon a number of likes, which is not necessarily a measurable metric in the sense that it can be manipulated. In the past have always been people who have been guilty of buying followers online, buying likes, joining what are called pods, where people specifically go and like and comment on another group of people's photos in order to increase their engagement and to make it look like their content is garnering more attention than it actually is. Also on Instagram, we saw book box companies starting monthly or weekly photo challenges, which encouraged consumers to post photos of their products, and then they would use those photos as a form of free advertising and repost those on their own accounts. On YouTube, many YouTubers would be recruited into rep programs, and they would be sent a monthly subscription box for free with the understanding that they would then be showing off the products that they received, whether in a book haul video or some other type of video, usually in book haul videos, which tended to be the most viewed videos at the time. This was often known as an unboxing video. These programs were then extended to Bookstagrammers, and I would say that these even overtook BookTube once Instagram introduced video into their service. This allowed for more short form unboxings, and by using hashtags, consumers were able to search for these unboxings to see if it is something that they wanted to get. If they didn't want to wait and wanted to be spoiled on what the book would be, you can search and see somebody who received it early, and then you would have an idea if it's something that you wanted to subscribe to. And then the second answer for this question is also the pandemic. but still social media. So during the pandemic, with many brick and mortar stores being closed, with many people opting to stay home as we were supposed to do in order to keep everyone else safe, subscription boxes definitely had a second wave boom. Readers found their way to subscription boxes, and the subscription service allowed books to be delivered directly to your door without having to go outside into the chaos of our worlds. Things were obviously very stressful during this time. I mean, I don't have to tell you, it was extremely recent history, but I think that that also led to a majority of people craving some type of escapism, and that also cultivated a whole new generation of readers. While many people were unable to meet in person, they were able to communicate over the internet through different book communities, talk about their love of reading with people who shared the same interests as them. So ultimately, people with a love of reading also had an endless amount of time to just consume social media, and this is really what led to the rise of BookTok. BookTok definitely brought a huge boom to the publishing industry, to the point where we see BookTok tables within brick and mortar bookstores like Barnes & Noble. It also brought on an entirely new wave of book influencers on BookTok, and it also brought about a new generation, like a next wave of booktubers. Reading even became so in demand during this time that many libraries had to limit allotments that they had on placing holds and taking books out, which, was being done digitally. So like, for instance, for the New York Public Library now, you can only take 3 books out at a time. And I think that you can also only have 3 books on hold at a time. So you have to really be strategic about what you're choosing. I mean, that's pretty cool that libraries had to do that just to manage the overwhelming uptick in people who were expressing interest in books. But anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. So to get back on subject, we're just going to talk about what makes a special edition special. So these are some characteristics, some customizations that are often seen in special editions. Some of the most popular things would be a signed copy of a book, a numbered or lettered copy. These ones are usually much more scarce than the books that are being distributed monthly by book boxes. We've also seen the rise of not only an exclusive colorway on a cover, but an exclusive cover altogether. There's also been exclusive casing. There's been beautifully illustrated end papers. One of the most popular customizations in recent years are sprayed pages. Sometimes we'll see additional content. One of my personal favorites is foil embossing. There might also be a ribbon bookmark, Smith-sewn binding, as well as acid-free paper. And we've also seen exclusive illustrations and beautiful interior artwork. So next we have to think about what makes a special edition valuable. So in addition to the customizations listed above, one of the main things that makes special editions valuable is their scarcity. You cannot simply go to any website and be like, I saw this really beautiful book and I want to buy a copy. You also cannot go to many of these subscription websites and say, wow, they've done some really great books in the past. I will subscribe right now. You're often added to a wait list. The wait list is often months long, and you have to wait to be offered an invite from that company once they have space open up within their subscription. Another thing that makes them valuable is their perceived value, as well as some of these more scarce books being seen as something of a status symbol. This value often comes in the form of social recognition via comments and likes on social media posts. And lastly, I would say value as determined by the resale market and at what price point consumers are actually buying books at secondhand. It's important to not only look at the listing price, but to look at prices that consumers are actually paying. Then we're going to just move into some common complaints among the book boxes. So number one, without a doubt, is cost. It is definitely expensive. So of the book boxes that I am subscribed to, my YA Fairy Loot subscription is my least expensive subscription, and that costs me $34.90 per month, which is $10 to $15 above the price of a standard young adult hardcover. Due to international shipping, the Broken Binding is my most expensive subscription, and that can be close to $50 a month. According to a Thin Models Lab article, in August of 2023, 2023, book boxes are making 20 to 40% profit on what they're offering. It also states that companies are generating anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 in revenue per month, though I actually do believe that it's much higher because they quote the average book subscription box to have anywhere from 500 to 5,000 subscribers. However, I do believe that Owlcrate, Fairy Loot, and Illumicrate all have well over 5,000 subscribers, even going so far as to in the 10,000 to 50,000 range. It is extremely difficult to find numbers of subscriber bases. Basically, none of them are forthcoming about their subscriber base numbers. However, I did find an article in September of 2023 where Anissa, who is the owner and founder of Fairy Loot, was quoted as saying that their subscriber base was in the thousands. I also found a thesis paper that did a case study of Owlcrate in 2020, and at that point they were credited as having over 10,000 subscribers, and it's arguable that their subscriber base has only grown since then, especially with the addition of their adult-only fantasy book box. So without taking any operations costs into consideration, that could be upwards of $370,000 per month. But back to complaints. One of the biggest complaints that I've seen recently is that many of these book boxes are all choosing the same title each month, which totally makes sense. If we have the same target market and we have the same interests, it's the same books that become popular within our community. Obviously, there's going to be overlap. There's also not an infinite number of new books that are coming out each month, and these subscriptions largely focus on fantasy with the exception of Afterlight and Evernight and some other ones that have popped up, but the majority of book boxes usually feature fantasy titles. So obviously there's going to be overlap, which leads to the next complaint, which is skip policies. So some companies like Owlcrate have an unlimited skip policy, which is so nice for subscribers because, again, if there's going to be overlap, you don't want to receive like 5 of the same book every month. It just is unreasonable. You don't need that many copies of the same book, especially before you've read it. You don't want to spend that much money on the same book 5 times. Then there are other companies like the Bookish Box who offer a very limited number of skips. So for the Bookish Box and Darkly Box, you are only able to use 2 skips per year, and then they reset at the end of the year. Illumicrate has a great policy. It's not unlimited skips, but you could lose your subscription if you skip 10 months in a row. So arguably, if you are subscribed, there is hopefully going to be at least 2 books within the year that you're interested in getting. And then with Fairy Loot, you can skip 4 times per subscription. So 4 times for YA, 4 times for adult. If you do subscribe for like the YA adult book combo, then you can only use 4 skips total. Another complaint is lead time on shipping for pre-orders. Oftentimes you can place an order for a book and it will be months and months before you receive it. And if that's something that you know upfront, like that shouldn't be a problem and you shouldn't be bothering companies about that. They are usually pretty transparent about their shipping updates. A lot of them have a dedicated blog post that they continually update with progress on where they are with certain editions. But then there are other companies, for instance, like the Bookish Box, which I had been subscribed to for a while. I received my September book of the month in the last couple of weeks, and I have not gotten October, November, or December, or January or February of 2023 and 2024. So that seems like an incredibly long lead time. Another common complaint is unorganized pre-sale experiences for consumers. So there are many people that subscribe to some of these different subscriptions, not because they want to get the monthly book, but because it gives them early access to sales that the company is doing of other series, sometimes backlist series, sometimes newer series, but either way, subscribers get early access, and oftentimes those books will sell out during early access. So if you are not subscribed and you are planning on purchasing something during the general public sale, it's likely not going to happen. One of the most recent frustrations, especially for myself, is Fairy Loot has implemented a queue system on their website, and while I believe it helps them on the back end from having their website crash because there's an overwhelming number of people all all signing on at the same time to try to get their hands on whatever edition they're offering. It's extremely frustrating for the consumer because you can be waiting for what feels like forever. For instance, they recently held a sale for Howl's Moving Castle, and I was one of the lucky people that only ended up being in the queue for probably about an hour and a half, but I did talk to other people who were waiting in that queue for literally 5 hours. I don't know how someone can do that if you're working. Like, you can't really be sitting in a queue for 5 hours of your work day. It just is not a good look. I will say, I think that the Broken Binding has the best pre-sale experience of any company, and I wish that more people would implement their system. One of the best things about them is if you purchase the first book in a series, you'll be offered earlier access than anyone else. So Fairy Loot does this too. However, their early access sale is only a couple of hours earlier than their subscriber access sale, whereas the Broken Binding, I've gotten emails saying like, hey, you bought the first book, you have a month to purchase this second book if you're interested. So not everyone is trying to get on at the same time. They are really good about reserving the kind of stock that they need to fulfill demand. And I just wish more people would follow in their footsteps. And there have also been complaints about a lack of diversity within the book titles that are being chosen. I do feel like book boxes have made this more of a priority and have been doing a better job about picking diverse titles, but it's still something that could be better. So moving on to the Instagram polls that I posted, I just wanted to get like a general pulse check from people who follow me that are interested in this topic. So my first question was, how many book boxes are you currently subscribed to? It was multiple choice, so you could either choose 0, 1 to 2, 3 to 4, or 5+. There were 576 people that voted. 56% of people said they were subscribed to 0 subscription boxes. 26% said they were subscribed to 1 to 2. 12% said they were subscribed to 3 to 4. And 7% said that they were subscribed to 5+. My second question was, what is the main reason that you collect special editions? 51% of you said to read or enjoy. 44% of you said to collect or photograph. And 5% of you said other. Obviously, there is overlap there, and the people who are buying them to read and enjoy could also be buying them to photograph and for their collection, and people who are buying them specifically to photograph could also read and enjoy them. But I do think that those answers being neck and neck is really interesting. And my last question was, how do you feel about the current state of special editions? 34% of you said that you feel excited and enthusiastic. 53% said that you are less excited than you used to be. And 13% of you said that you are over it. While there definitely are people that are still excited about special editions, I know I am still excited. I'm still buying them. I still love having them for my collection, but I am feeling a certain amount of fatigue. And it does seem like a lot of you are also experiencing the same thing. I personally actually went through all of my subscriptions the other day and I decided to pare things down. I ended up canceling 4 of the subscriptions that I had currently been subscribed to, because even with the skip policies, it was just getting overwhelming to have to keep track of every month what was coming out from which box, what I needed to skip at what time, when does the renewal go through for this one or that one. And I think by paring it down and having spent the last year keeping track of what I have read from each of the subscriptions, what I have enjoyed from each of the subscriptions, it's also given me a clearer idea of whether it's been worth it to have some of these subscriptions. And I would encourage you to do the same thing and to go through and to really pay attention to which books you've actually read that you've gotten from subscription boxes and whether it is worth it to keep a subscription or not. So in conclusion, I feel like we could see a change in the way that things are done. I think that the book subscription boxes that are going to succeed are the ones who do things a little bit differently or have some type of uniqueness to them that we're not seeing amongst other boxes. I think it's been really interesting to see the way that subscriptions have evolved over time. It started out being a book along with items. Now it's more about the book. We've also seen the way that customizations have really changed over the years. They started as exclusive colorways on covers to so fully decked out, all different customizations that are more readily available now. We've also seen the way that Kickstarters have really changed the industry of special editions. We've seen publishers and retailers getting into the special edition game. And we've also reached a point where there are so many options that the special edition market is incredibly oversaturated. It is physically impossible to keep up with every special edition of every book, which I think is a good thing because I think it is allowing consumers to be choosier about what it is that they want. I think in the early days, it was really exciting to get something that was so different than anything that you could get if you just went into a bookstore. It made it seem really special, and even if you weren't necessarily like interested in a title, it was still like so fun to receive that book because it was such like a special, different, unique item. And now there's just an overwhelming amount of special editions, so you just don't need everything. Like, you really should be very mindful about what it is that you want, what it is that you want to have for your collection, what it is that you want to spend your hard-earned money on. I hope that you guys enjoyed this deep dive. I had a really fun time just researching everything. I spent so many hours looking deeply into all of these companies, and it was a lot of fun for me. I think I would like to do some more deep dives in the future. If you have any suggestions for anything that you would want to deep dive on, please let me know below because I would be happy to do another one. Please comment. Please let me know your feelings on the special edition market. Let me know your feelings on book boxes. If your feelings have evolved over the years, let me know what you're currently subscribed to. Let me know if my video has helped you be more mindful about what it is that you want to subscribe to in the future. If you stuck with me until the end, thank you, because this is obviously a really long video. Again, it was a lot of fun to film, so thank you. And that's all that I have for this video. I will see you guys soon in a new one. Bye!